So, on today's episode, we are actually going to be talking about the active rest. And I know this won't be a completely unfamiliar topic to many of you, especially those of you who maybe really enjoy nature or tune into nature and watch the cycle that nature goes through throughout the year, where there are times of active growing and there are times of rest. But to me, I felt called to talk about this week because so much of the focus right now in January is always the whole new year, new you kind of thinking. And if you are like me, you don't really think that January is the beginning of the new year. If you follow the seasons or astrology, you may be more inclined to think that the spring equinox is actually the beginning of the year because that is when things start growing. January, at least for us in the Northern Hemisphere, occurs during winter when things are dormant. They are resting. They are growing. If they are growing at all, it's very slow. They are instead focused on recovering from the previous growing season. That's what the plants outside are doing right now. And so, in alignment with that, there's not really, for me, a new year, new you kind of feeling. Instead, January is one of rest. And so today I am going to be sharing with you something I recorded a couple years ago for a course. And this segment is specifically talking about the active rest cycle. And so here we're going to start talking about the active rest cycle. And I think this is a huge problem in our lives and a huge block and why so many of us feel disconnected from ourselves and from our path. This is part of why we can't hear our intuition. We can't hear our inner guidance because we're stuck on the active side of this cycle. We're not resting and we're not giving ourselves the space and breathing room to slow down, to hear our intuition, and to hear our higher selves. And until we start giving ourselves that space, we will never truly connect with our deep purpose. We just won't be able to hear it. We won't be able to align with it because we'll be too stuck kind of sending our energy outward and being active instead of turning inward and being reflective. And so this active cycle, if you work with the lunar cycle, you're familiar with this. Like I said, the cycle is everywhere in the world around us. And the way this cycle works is you start off with stage 1, where you have an idea. So if you're familiar with the lunar cycle, this is pretty much the new moon. It's where you're setting your new moon intention. So the first step of the cycle, stage 1, you have an idea, you have a spark of where you want to go. Stage 2 is taking action. In the lunar cycle, this is kind of like the first quarter moon, where you're taking action towards your intention that you set at the new moon. Stage 3 is celebration. So in the lunar cycle, that's the full moon. It's a time where you are celebrating your hard work. So all of this, stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3 are all what I call the active side of the active rest cycle. You have an idea, you're talking about the idea, you're sharing it, you're working on it, you're celebrating it, you're acknowledging it. You're kind of basking in the glow of your idea and all your hard work. And then we move to the other half of the active rest cycle, which is the rest part of the cycle. And in the lunar cycle, this is the last quarter moon. Stage 4 and stage 5 are really combined when it comes to the lunar cycle. But stage 4 is reflection, where you are looking back at your idea, the action you took, and the outcome, and maybe making any mental notes, maybe thinking about any adjustments you might want to make if you want to continue working with this idea. You're thinking about what worked, what didn't work, what information can you gather from this idea, how can you learn from it, what do you want to take forward and maybe apply to other things. And you're also thinking about what didn't work, what didn't feel right for you, what didn't feel in alignment, what did you experience that you knew when it happened, you were like, I never want to do that again. That's stage 4. And then you have stage 5, which is rest. And that's simply giving yourself space to rest. And I do want to mention a lot of times people, when they hear the word rest, they think you need to be physically resting, like lying in bed, not doing anything. And that can be rest for some people. But I do want to mention that rest doesn't mean you have to be sleeping or napping or lying in bed. Rest means you are doing something that is restful for you. It's something that is replenishing your energy. So even if it's something that you expend energy doing, that takes energy for you to do, if it helps you replenish more energy than it takes to do it, it's a restful activity. So for example, that might be gardening. Maybe gardening, you're actually physically doing something. It takes energy to do it. You are expending energy, but there's a sense of peace. There's a sense of calm. There's a sense of stillness. There's a sense of just feeling yourself being grounded and centered and coming back into alignment and feeling more energized when you are done with the gardening task. For some people, they like walking or doing some kind of exercise that helps them feel rested, restful. Others like being still. They like to nap. They like to just sit in stillness. Some people like to read. Some people like to drink tea. There's a lot of different things. Knitting, painting. A lot of times our hobbies are actually restful activities for us. That's why we kind of gravitate towards them as our hobbies. But the problem is we can get caught up in the active part of this cycle and not spend time doing restful activities, not spend time doing hobbies that are in alignment with the needs we have for rest. Or we take our hobbies and we make them competitive or put them on a timeline or a time constraint or make them our job, and then they are no longer restful activities. So when it comes to this active rest cycle, most of us, if we're going to get stuck somewhere in this cycle, we tend to get stuck in stage 1 or stage 2, where we get stuck where we have idea after idea after idea after idea, but we don't ever actually do anything with them. We don't carry them through the rest of the stages. Or we get stuck in stage 2, where we have an idea and we're taking action, but we just kind of repeat this. We have an idea and we take action. We have an idea and we take action. We have an idea and we take action. We don't actually make time for celebrating our hard work and celebrating ourselves. We don't take time for reflecting on the action we took and the outcome of it and what needed to be adjusted, what felt in alignment, what felt off, what didn't feel like what felt like you needed to let go or not ever do again. And we definitely don't take time for rest. I mean, I think we can all agree we do not rest enough, generally speaking, as a society. And so one of the things I want you to keep in mind about this active rest cycle is that it's a reminder. It is a reminder that you can use as a way to give yourself the permission you seek to move to different stages of this cycle. Because a lot of time what we actually need is we need to give ourselves permission to, it's okay to celebrate this. It's okay to be proud of your hard work. It's okay to slow down. It's safe to slow down. It's safe to rest. Because we get so caught up in stage 1 and stage 2, sometimes we need a little bit of hand holding to move through the other stages. And I totally know, I get it. It would be really nice if we all had someone who would just walk into our house and be like, okay, you've done enough work. Now I'm giving you permission to rest. you're going to close down the laptop and step away from the phone, and you're going to go over here and do this thing that is restful for you, and you'll feel better after you do it. It'd be nice if we had someone to come and remind us to, you're going to, take 20 minutes and you're going to sit down and drink this tea and you're not going to worry about anything else. That would be great. But unfortunately, it's really up to us to be aware of where we are on this active rest cycle, to be aware of where we may be getting stuck, and just gently remind ourselves to, be like, okay, let's move on to this next part of the cycle. I feel like I'm getting stuck here. The energy's getting stagnant. We need to move on. What would feel like a good way to gently help myself move forward here? So really working with the cycle is just important to notice if you find yourself getting stuck, or you have you're struggling with one stage of the cycle and you're kind of trying to gently walk yourself through it. For example, me personally, I tend to stage 3 and stage 5 are the hardest for me, and stage 3 is the hardest for me. It's really hard for me to say I'm going to be visible and celebrate myself and acknowledge myself. And so I know whenever I'm working on a project, or I'm kind of at this point in the cycle where I really need to pay attention to not skip stage 3 and to actually celebrate my hard work. And this can be done in a lot of ways. And personally, I like looking to, if I'm feeling like, well, I don't know, especially with celebration, if I'm like, I don't know how to celebrate myself, I look to when I was a child, what I would have liked, what would have felt like a celebration for me. And so that may be like going and getting a milkshake or a cupcake, or, some special treat to eat to celebrate. And maybe I take my milkshake or my cupcake and I go sit outside in the backyard surrounded by nature and all the flowers. And maybe I have a book, and, it's that quiet, peaceful time that like I really cherish and that really is restful for me. But I'm doing things like with a little cupcake or a milkshake that just feels a little indulgent and kind of pleases my inner child to some degree. So things like that can be a nice, helpful clue or insight into how you might like to celebrate if you feel stuck with ideas for that. And the other thing I wanted to mention here is if you feel like you're having a hard time remembering the cycle or kind of staying attuned to it, just look to the lunar cycle. If you want to take a few months to use the lunar cycle as a very broad guide, where stage 1 of the active rest cycle is the new moon phase. Stage 2 is the first quarter moon. Stage 3 is the full moon. And stage 4 and 5 are kind of combined together for the last quarter moon. You can follow the lunar cycle as a guide just to kind of dip your toes in the water. This especially is helpful if you're already familiar with the lunar cycle. You can kind of use them as layers. And so this can help you give yourself the space to rest and relax and tune in and have that space to hear your intuition and your higher self. The other way of looking at the active rest cycle that can help you kind of get a framework for it and understand it is looking at it through the lens of the seasons. And so obviously this is a little different because this is a bigger scale, because the seasons is, the full entire year, where your active rest cycle can really fluctuate depending on how your energy is moving. You can go through the entire active rest cycle in a day. It can be a week. It can be a month. There's a lot of different layers of how it might show up for you. But with the active rest cycle, kind of shifting the lens a little bit and looking at it through the seasons, stage 1, where you have that new idea, that's kind of like the winter, where you have an idea, like it's the spark of something. You're not really acting on it yet. It's like akin to your, New Year's intention or your yearly goal that you set. You have to think when we're setting our goals for the year, it's usually winter. It's like the middle of winter. We're not really super active. We're not doing anything yet, but we are kind of thinking big. We're dreaming big. We're thinking of the year ahead. And then we move into spring. And spring is all about new life, new growth. Things are just cropping up all around you. New plants and, there's baby animals and brand new green grass, and there's just new everywhere. And so that's when the energy is starting to build and you're starting to take action and start to get moving on your idea. And then the energy just keeps building and we move into summer. And this is where things are kind of in full bloom. Some crops and plants are ready to be harvested during the summer. So the summer is this really wonderful balance of play and also hard work. And it's a time of celebration. If you are familiar with, growing crops and plants, you might realize that the summer is actually a time where you start to begin to harvest. You can start to see the rewards of your hard work, of the effort you've put in. And so it's a time of you're celebrating your hard work, you're celebrating your accomplishments. That's stage 3 in the active rest cycle. And then autumn rolls around, and this is stage 4 and 5 of the active rest cycle. And this is when harvesting is usually in full swing. You're taking what worked and leaving behind what didn't, cutting out the old or, dead growth, looking at what didn't bloom, what didn't grow, reassessing it, reevaluating it. It's when you are reflecting in the active rest cycle, stage 4, and resting. You have stored up all the provisions you need for the winter ahead, and you're ready to kind of settle down.